meeting, I think, today, packed with all the usual fun, but some extra special guests to come and make it even more exciting. So I'm definitely looking forward to this one very much. We had an apology for absence from Will. Can't remember Will's second name, sorry, but he might be Roebuck, thank you. Yeah, he might be a little bit later. Have we got any other apologies at this point?
I've received apologies also from Councillor Byford, Marie Gilliolly, Liz Town-Andrews, Nick Plant, Mark Robson and Neville Young.
Good, okay. I think we've got Mark on the call actually, or no, maybe not. Anyway, good, so that's who we are, and it is most people, so thank you again. Can I ask, does anybody wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest? Anything new on that score? Okay, thank you. No. I think everybody will have read the information that explains that these meetings are beamed live on YouTube. So we're live on YouTube at the moment. I guess it's conceivable at some point in the future we might have an item that was not going to be part of that, in which case we would say so, but today there isn't anything like that, so members of the public may well be watching us throughout this afternoon. In terms of how we conduct the meeting now, I'm happy to look at people putting up their hands in the way that you can do that on Zoom, or indeed if you want to put something on chat, and then perhaps Ben or Sarah Bowes also could help me if I'm missing somebody who's trying to make an input. But obviously I will be watching. We're a little bit over the 25 people that I can see on my screen, so it's possible that I wouldn't be able to see you, so don't be offended if I don't get you straight away. Anyway, first item, substantive item, the minutes of the meeting of the last effort that we did. Does anybody have any comments on that? Okay, good. It is quite a long time ago. I think it's about 4 months ago or something, that meeting. And that is a slight ongoing problem that we're going to have, I think, for the next year or a little bit more, where our meetings are going to be immediately after the main LEP panel has met, and it is necessarily going to mean that there's quite a lot of gap between our meeting and the LEP panel that we're reporting up to. I think it's not an entirely negative thing, however, because it does mean that the reports that we're reviewing at the moment are generally current and are the ones that the main LEP board will have been looking at too. So there is some benefit in that, but it does probably mean that, as we have done since the last meeting, this time we may well be doing some more things in between meetings to make sure that we keep up momentum on the things that matter. Okay, in terms of a chair's update. Sorry?
Join the meeting. Okay.
Chair's update, what's going on at the moment. The big effort that's been the centre of a lot of attention in Wicker and the LEP, and particularly with the officers, is the economic recovery plan, and I hope you've all had a chance to see that. A special effort made by a combination of the chief executives of the districts and a number of other parties that were involved in that, and a detailed plan has been drawn up which shows a selection, probably not all of the special things that are being done in response to the COVID-19. And we've got quite a focus on that also, as you'd expect in this meeting. So quite a bit of that will come up, and specifically we'll get some report on that in item 7. We've also, I want to welcome a few additional people that we've got today, as well as the new members of the panel, who probably for some of whom it's their second meeting, so they're obviously very welcome. But we've got Liz Gardner, George Lauderforce and Natalie Allen are all going to be making inputs in the items that are coming up, and you will have seen that, I guess, in reviewing the papers. And I also want to welcome Mark Roberts, who's here as the deputy chair of the main LEP board, and he's also involved on a membership of the panel basis in the skills panel also. So he's welcome with both those hats on, and I'm looking forward to him making contributions on a number of the items here today. So thanks for coming, Mark. So with that, can I pass over to James Hopton, who's going to give us the latest economic and business intelligence, and start this process of understanding what COVID-19 is doing to us. We can have a few questions after James's input, But it's also going to be possible to comment on this, I think, after the next item, which is talking about the impacts and recoveries as a slightly similar item. But you're on first, James. Are you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm good to go, Chair. Thank you. So just to say that I think our neighbours are having a new kitchen put in, so apologies if there's some banging in the background, but I can't do too much about it. But in terms of the kind of very headline impacts that we're seeing nationally at the moment, I think as most people are aware, but it's probably worth recapping, the economy is officially in recession after falling GDP in both Q1 and Q2 of this year. And GDP actually fell by a record 20% in the second quarter. Slightly more encouragingly, the figure for June, so the last month of that quarter, actually showed an increase in output of 8.7%, and that's much stronger than some people are expecting. So there is, some sign there that after the kind of full lockdown period in March, April, and May, we were seeing something of a recovery in June, but clearly that remains in its very early stages, and we need to see how that progresses. We've also seen unemployment increasing, so it increased a little in March and April and May, leveled off a bit in June, but then began to increase again a bit in July. So the sum of that is that there are now 108,000 people claiming out of work benefits in West Yorkshire, which is an increase of over 50,000 from where we were in March. So quite a substantial increase of 90%, but that is a little lower than the 114% we've seen nationally over that period. I mentioned that we're seeing that kind of something of a recovery in activity, and I think some of the other numbers bear that out. But I think it's worth saying that that's still a very gradual process. So one ONS survey of businesses has shown the number of people on furlough falling from around 30% in May time down to about 13% in the middle of August. But alongside that, there's still around 39% of people who are working from home. So if you take those two things together, it still means around half the workforce are away from their normal place of work as of mid-August. The latest transport data we have, which we have more locally and up to the week before last, does show something of an increase in footfall, particularly in Leeds rail stations. So there are signs more recently that may be increasing a little. But it does remain quite gradual, and I think that the next big kind of milestone in that respect, obviously, is the return to school and how that impacts on how people are working and the kind of decisions they're making about their own place of work. And clearly, the other big thing on the horizon is the end of the furlough scheme at the end of October. So. Again, just referring back to that ONS survey, there are still some sectors where it shows around a quarter of jobs are still furloughed, particularly the kind of arts and entertainment and culture sector and accommodation, food and hospitality. Together, those sectors employ 195,000 people in West Yorkshire. So there is, still quite a big exposure there for sectors where furloughing is still quite prevalent. And given that in total we've seen around a third of all jobs furloughed in West Yorkshire, I think we all need to keep a close eye on what happens as that scheme begins to unwind and what decisions businesses have to make at that point. And some of the anecdotal evidence that we're picking up from the growth services conversations with businesses is, as you would expect, that the kind of end of the job retention scheme next month is probably a critical decision point for many in terms of their kind of workforce and where they go from that point. But clearly, it's not just limited to those sectors that I mentioned. There are businesses across all sectors who are kind of interacting with those either in kind of supplier or customer relationships. So if there are suppliers into the hospitality industry, for example, or those engage in the kind of commercial fit out of retail and leisure space, where they're telling us that they are still seeing impact. So even though it's kind of most prevalent in those sectors, it's an issue for businesses across all sectors. So that's something we're doing some work on with Brian and his team in economic services, is to try and understand where some of those exposures might be, and try and be on the front foot with understanding where we may see some of those impacts. One final thing I really thought was worth highlighting was just the extent of the business support take-up that we've seen so far. So, you know, I'm sure everyone will be aware of various grants and loan schemes that have been made available to businesses to support them through the pandemic so far. And through those schemes, we've seen grants worth about 485 million paid to West Yorkshire businesses. And on top of that, businesses in the area have taken up loans of around 1.3 billion. And almost 35,000 businesses have taken up a loan of some sort in West Yorkshire. So that's more than a third of all businesses who've taken just one product in the bounce back loan, which offers loans of up to 50,000. So we have seen kind of really extensive take up of those products. And I think there is some evidence that that's kind of helped to mitigate some of the impact so far. Some of the measures we're tracking around things like business credit ratings and business liquidations and dissolutions have shown an improving picture over the past 2 or 3 months, and definitely appear much more stable than they were in March and April. So I think that potentially shows some of the kind of positive impact that support has had so far. But we certainly wouldn't want to be complacent about that, and certainly as those schemes unwind over the next couple of months, I think we're entering another critical phase where we need to keep a close eye on where those things are going, and I'm sure Brian and colleagues next will talk about the kind of schemes that they have in place to address some of those issues. But they're the main things that I wanted to cover for now.
Good, thank you, James. So that's clear, I think, and certainly from my business point of view, we'd echo the points you're making about the end of the month and maybe next month being a critical period as the furlough winds down. I think, you know, I'm in the textile business, and in common with many other manufacturing businesses, I guess we're well down on where we would have expected to be without COVID, but we're not picking up yet. So the worry is for everybody, I'm sure. How much do you gamble on it coming back? And the furlough period hasn't bridged us through to a vaccine. So we're all in the dark, aren't we, about how long we're going to be here? And if it was all done by Christmas, I'm sure most people would be fine. But you know, if it's next Christmas, it's a very different story, isn't it? And that's the uncertainty we're all living with. Would anybody else like to comment on James's input at this point? Okay, well, let's move on to the next item, which, as I said, was highly related. I see Henry's on the call. Thank you, Henry. Are you ready to give us a little bit on the activities that we've been doing to support businesses through COVID-19? And then I think we're going to ask Ian then to follow up also after that, aren't we?
Yep, sure. Thanks very much, Andrew. Yeah, so just to echo some of those comments that James made, and I think we've got some of that in the paper as well, in terms of the very high volume of inquiries that to the business support service, to the gateway. If we look at the inquiries are probably 80% up. The figures that we looked at in July were 80% up on July the previous year, which has had some positives in terms of us reaching out to and with businesses that we might not have engaged with previously. But obviously, the nature of the correspondence of the inquiry is not the same. You know, his businesses, again, as James said, concerned about the furlough arrangements and the changes. Concerns about returning to work safely, what's their responsibility for their workplace, for their staff, and asking for clarity, and then I guess more traditional business support issues around cash flow, in particular, managing the finances. We are seeing some sectors faring better than others. I think it's fair to say certainly the food and drink manufacturing sector is one sector where we have continued to fairly high levels of investment in terms of business impact investment and looking for grant support to do that. And that has been a trend probably since about May, June time, where we've continued to see quite a large number of food and drink manufacturers and those in the associated supply chain who supply machinery and services into that sector continue to be making investments right across the city region, but particularly in the West Yorkshire districts. But of course, some other areas of manufacturing have been much harder hit. When we look at automotive, area sectors that previously we had quite a lot of engagement with around grant applications. So in terms of what we're actually doing to support businesses, again, as James referenced there, in terms of the grants that have been made available through the local authorities, the original scheme, and then the discretionary grants. It's been West Yorkshire in particular. And the growth managers have obviously been a key part of that, working with their colleagues in the local authorities to manage very, very high volume and disbursement. And some, very significant figures. Those figures are probably quite a bit higher than the ones that you see there at 2.7 in the report. And those grants will continue to be paid to businesses, I think, through the rest of this month, and then they'll to wind down towards the end of the month. We've made some grants available to help businesses that have had to work remotely and invest in ICT and digital equipment and software to do that, and that's been very popular, with over 500 applications coming in from businesses this week. So we're working through helping small businesses in particular to get that equipment and to enable them to work safely and secure locations using different platforms and technologies, which is very important, of course. And linked to that, and again, this is something that I think we discussed at the big panel last time, and it has also been raised at the skills at the digital board as well for the city region, the importance of cyber security for small businesses. So we have been some delay in terms of getting the government approval for this funding, but we are out to tender now for an organisation to help us provide help and support to small businesses around cyber security, which I think there's going to be high demand for that. The plan is to then embed that within the digital enterprise programme longer term, so that we can make that sustainable and not make it just a one hit. We will, at the end of this month, be launching what unhelpful is also called the Kickstart scheme, but it's not the same Kickstart scheme as the as the Young People's Placement Scheme. So we're just going to call it ERDF Uplift, but basically these are COVID recovery grants for businesses, whereby businesses will be able to purchase consultancy support or small pieces of IT technology equipment that will help them to recover from COVID and hopefully put them in a more resilient position moving forward. So there will be small grants, £1,000 to £3,000. We're actually going to deliver this scheme across all of West and North Yorkshire, as there wasn't a project in North Yorkshire in delivery that could be attached, that this extra funding could be attached to. So we've just been out to tender to get some assistance from a delivery partner to help deliver this grant scheme at pace, and to make sure we can get that support into businesses as soon as possible. The funding is only available for this financial year, so it's in our best interest to move as quickly as possible, and then we might be in a position to go back to colleagues in MSC in government to try and get some additional funding to move it forward. We're also doing some additional work around peer-to-peer learning, and we've had some funding made available to us from the Department for Business to undertake a peer-to-peer programme. All the evidence suggests that businesses do like to learn from one another and get that critical aspect of peer support in the current climate. So we've just been out to tender. We're just assessing those tenders now. We had 11 responses, and we'll be making an award to an organisation to deliver peer support to a cohort of six groups of SMEs, up to 11 in each cohort. And again, if this is successful and we get the good learnings from it, we'll be looking to roll out across the city region on a more permanent basis. So yes, and then just to emphasise, I guess, that there are still lots of other products out there that were available pre-COVID, which continue to be accessed by businesses, and we're just being able to pivot those, diversify those to help meet current need, particularly where businesses might need to think about operating in a different way, using new products and processes, adapting what they're doing already to meet new markets, because that's definitely going to be a critical factor moving forward. David Shepherd and his team continue to engage with the larger employers across the city region to understand occasionally the opportunities that may present themselves through the current situation, and to gather that really rich and important intelligence on the ground. So I think, Andrew, they were the main things I need to bring out in the COVID report before we invite our colleagues from an update on the programme that they're involved in, the Small Business Leadership Programme. But I'm happy to pause and take any questions or comments at that stage, if that's okay.
Certainly, yeah. And we've got Ian Smith also going to follow up as well. Somebody's hand went up, but Amir, did you want to say something, and then I'll come to Brian?
Yeah, thank you. I think the peer-to-peer proposition is really, really powerful, and certainly in my experience of sort of the opportunity of supply chains and uplifting businesses through that mechanism is really good. I just wondered, invariably, the people that participate in these sometimes are people that are already doing very well, are already sort of on a trajectory that is probably better than most businesses that are in the area. And how can we ensure that actually the people that are not normally involved in these sorts of things could actually create exemplar outcomes that people within their social circles and within their business communities can also benefit from, and not just people that are ordinarily sort of quite engaged anyway?
So I think, yeah, it's a good point, Amir, and I think there's obviously something we've discussed in and out of panel meetings in recent times. Well, obviously, we will be custodians of the funding. We'll be appointing a contractor, and one of the key elements of us today, we want this to be representative of the the business population across the region. So that doesn't. We will have the opportunity, of course, to say, listen, we think you need to broaden this out a little bit and get a better mix that we do think is much more representative of the full business demographic. It is a pilot. There's only going to be space for 60 or 70 businesses, but certainly I think we need to get some of that key learning into it. So it might well be something we come back and have a chat with you about as well, Amir, when we score the tenders and have identified the partner we want to work with.
Good, thank you. Brian, would you like to say something?
Yeah, so, thanks, Chairman. Just a couple of things to add to Henry's presentation. A couple of observations, really. Access to finance. Yes, there's been a huge amount of money that's gone into Leeds City region businesses. I think something like just shy of, I think James was saying it was just shy of £500 million has gone out to 36,000 businesses. And the banks nationally have lent £35 billion to SMEs, over 1.2 million bounce back loans. But there is still evidence that the money's still taking too long to get through to businesses, and a lot of anxiety about running out of cash. I think the recent Chamber survey said that 1 in 3 firms that were surveyed had less than 3 months cash. So the access to finance problem hasn't gone away. And I know that the banks have been absolutely overwhelmed by the number of applications they've received. So that's led to some bounce back loans taking up to 2 to 3 months to to get approved. So we're not out of the woods yet in terms of access to finance. And then the other thing I wanted to say was, again, as Henry mentioned, the demand for grant support and funding support has gone through the roof. I think the growth managers and the helpline staff have done an amazing job. We've seen nearly an 80% increase in inquiries over last year, and they've been absorbed within existing resource. Access to advice is the other thing that I think we've had some success with. The mentor scheme that we talked about in the peer group learning has been really well received. There was additional funding of about 1.3 million to support specialist consultancy and cyber security, as Henry mentioned. So, some good news on that front. But again, demand is outstripping supply. We'd like to do more, and we'd like to see government put more revenue funding into business support schemes. We talked about furlough, 320,000 people on furlough in the Leeds City region. Obviously, the government contribution drops by 10% this month, then another 10%, and then the scheme ends. And that's going to be a crucial kind of pivot point in terms of the number of people entering the labour market. The impact will be particularly felt by young people, 16 to 24-year-olds. So last Wednesday, the government launched the Kickstart scheme, which is a wages subsidy for a 6-month placement, where companies that offer a placement for up to, for a minimum of 25 hours a week would be paid a wages subsidy. Large employers that can offer at least 30 placements have been referred to the national DWP website, but organisations that offer fewer than 30 placements have to go through a local sponsor organisation who will aggregate all the potential placements and then submit them to DWP. And we need to just work out how we're going to respond to that locally, so we're on the front foot. But to give you some idea of scale, I think we've got 26,000 eligible individuals in the Leeds City region that would potentially qualify for this new Kickstart scheme. So we need to work out, some of the logistics of how that's going to work in practice, and that's an emerging picture at the moment. And that's probably it, I think. I mean, I should just touch on the strategy and the recovery plan. I mean, obviously, we've got the 4 main strategic themes around health innovation, digital technologies, entrepreneurship, and the transition to net zero. And we're also looking at creative industries as well as we move that forward. But that's it from me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Mike, you had a point to make, I think. Mike Danby.
Yes, thank you. Just across this section and the next 2 or 3, we're looking at trying to promote employment, obviously. One of the things, it's dear to my heart, anybody that's been around for a few years now knows this. We need to promote productivity. Productivity is the way to generate jobs, and it generates wealth. And I'm not sure which section we're on now, but later on we're going to talk about the productivity project. Perhaps we should wait for that or not. But we're into about 2 years of a pilot. I want to know, when will the pilot have ended and we can either say, yes, productivity promotion is working, or it isn't? Because we can't wait, guys. The crisis is now.
Okay, Mike, I don't know whether, Henry, if you want to respond on the productivity pilot, and perhaps after that, Simon Wright might comment on the access to banking comments that were being made as well. Henry, have you got something on productivity? It was a success, I think, the second round, wasn't it? Which goes to Mike's point about what next, doesn't it?
Well, I think what next before COVID was that productivity, the approach of the 2 rounds for the productivity. I don't want to keep calling it pilot because we've done it twice now. So the productivity scheme was that would probably be core business for the capital grants program and for all our programs. We wouldn't just dealing in the currency of jobs. We'd be strongly looking at productivity improvements. We've got some really good findings back from the 20 odd businesses that we've now supported through the 2 productivity rounds, and we'll be coming back to the next big panel with a much more detailed update on impact and findings. The challenge is to make sure that we keep that focus on the next report. The business support update report is something on the findings of the evaluation of the business growth programme. And that's the funding that we used for the productivity rounds. And one of the clear recommendations, as Mike just said, from the independent evaluators, Warwick Economics, was that we must keep the focus on productivity. I guess the challenge is going to be, as we move to a period of higher unemployment, will we also need to reconsider, I guess, the importance of job creation? But I totally agree. I strongly want to keep that focus on productivity. And there are new schemes that we're bringing on board that don't have the job requirement element. They are looking for business improvement and business productivity as the outcome, such as connecting innovation and the strategic business growth programme, which are all about identifying those businesses that can drive improvements and performance.
I just like to reiterate, productivity is a job growth promoter. It isn't instead of, it is actually a job growth promoter. Without productivity, you cannot have new jobs. You just can't.
So it's good. It's good, I think, Mike, and that's what we're saying is if we can make it all of everything, that would be good, wouldn't
it? Just to finalise that, I know that's now on the agenda. Great. Just in the reporting for some of the programmes that are running, none of the reporting takes into account any productivity wins we might have had. It pretty much still focuses on jobs, and until we measure and tick our boxes that we achieved that, we're not really going to get there.
Okay. Yep.
Good point.
Do you want to comment on that, Henry? I think you've probably just got it, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm noting it down, and I'm going to be passing it on to my colleagues in policy and strategy to come up with a framework. No, it is very important. We do need to collect it better,
and I think also, if I might ask, as we do that, we think forward to the good work standard item that's coming later in the agenda as well, and see how those things fit together, so that we're picking up the general point that it would be good to be presenting one face about what we're looking for, which inclusive the inclusive growth stuff, it needs to be as much part of it as the productivity stuff, and somehow it all should add up to a good work standard, shouldn't it? Okay. Yes, Ian wanted to comment. Ian Smith.
Yeah, just to give a bit more on that, Andrew. Thank you from a strategy point of view. So absolutely, productivity is front and centre. That's why some of the things that are in the economic recovery plan in some of the specific asks are around some of our high growth, high productivity sectors, and we focused on those, although Henry's absolutely right that the focus has shifted a bit from creating good jobs to just protecting the ones that we've got by necessity for now. But the panel will remember that we put a lot of time in, particularly this panel, but all panels put a lot of time into working on the local industrial strategy for the region. That is still there in the background. It hasn't been finalised because you remember it was supposed to be a co-production with governments, and there's been no one around to co-produce it with between the Brexit and then the COVID-19 period. But we're going to start pressing now for some progress on that. And if, as we suspect, the government moves away from insisting that on all local areas having co-produced local industrial strategies, we will do something with that material ourselves, whether that be a productivity strategy or some other form of strategy, to make sure it's that ambition around productivity that Mike's absolutely right. It's not just jobs, but it's the driver of good jobs. That is completely in the new strategic economic framework, will be adopted in as a key focus for the LEP and the Combined Authority.
Good, thank you. And is there other input that you'd like to give as well, or was that kind of your input as well, following Henry's?
I was only going to just focus and say Brian touched on it, that we've got to a point with the economic recovery plan where a first version has been agreed by the LEP board and the Combined Authority last week. That's included. The links to those are included in your pack. we have written to the Chancellor leaders, and Roger have written to the Chancellor, highlighting that we've got this £1.4 billion requirement to invest in the West Yorkshire economy, for which we think there's a substantial return, not just for the local economy, but for the country. We await to hear their response, and in the meantime we're now looking into working with Henry's team just to see what things we can take forward, parts of that plan we can take forward, irrespective of the government's response. But obviously government getting behind those propositions and those proposals is a critical part of taking that forward now.
Good. Yes, thank you. Mark, would you like to come in now?
Thanks, Chair. And I just wanted to stress a point that Henry did talk to amongst a lot of others, but just how critical it is to look at the differences by sector. So I think, Andrew, at the introduction to this, you mentioned textiles, which is obviously something that's sort of still in the downturn. My own business has a combination of online distribution where demand has never been as great, and we're really struggling to keep up, and hospitality where it's really, really difficult right now, and it's a real balance. And I think, generally when we think about sort of a West Yorkshire response, we need to think about how our unique economy differs from national, and how our unique response needs to differ from national to reflect that sectoral makeup. And I think, when we're thinking about the business support and the growth manager conversations and the initiatives there, we really need to be thinking about sector by sector, because each business will be facing unique challenges. There will be similarities between sectors, and I think you're going to get a very, very diverse set of conversations. That's important. Our growth managers are sort of trained to deal with appropriately. So just really wanted to stress that sort of sectoral piece.
Good. Fine, thank you. Unless there's any other inputs at this point, I'm hoping that Henry and the officers feel that we've given some clear feedback there. So productivity was a big thrust, which is basically saying let's keep going with that. COVID doesn't actually change that story. Maybe it makes it at least as important as it was before. And then also this other important point that different sectors are experiencing COVID very differently, and we need to be tailoring our efforts to make sure that we're supporting the people who most need it, and who can, where we can make the most difference, I guess. I mean, there may be some people who we just can't help, and I wouldn't like to think there's too many of them, but certainly the people who need it, we need to be there. Henry, is that okay for you in terms of this item?
Andrew, yeah, we were just going to bring in our colleagues from Leeds Beckett at this point to talk about
this is moving on to
business leadership.
Yeah, so if we move on now to item 8, business support, and as part of this, we're inviting George Lauderfoss and Natalie Allen from Leeds Beckett to give us some input on a government scheme that was given money and Leeds Beckett tendered for and has been successful for. And we're delighted that you're in our region and you're doing this, and it's a good opportunity for us to hear about it.
Thank you.
Andrew and Henry.
Are you happy for me to share my screen? I just have a few very brief slides just to help get the information across. Is that okay?
Yes, of course. Go ahead, Natalie.
Thank you. Okay. George, did you want to start?
Yeah, just to give a little bit of background of where we are, just for a few minutes for the business school and the relationship with the small business charter. I'm absolutely delighted that I'm here, and very glad that we've got very similar agendas. Now, for those who have met me before and who had conversations, they know that the vision of the business school, it is to focus on being one of the most engaged business schools in the region. And in particular, where we're trying to specialize, it is very aligned with what was discussed earlier on, to develop regional economic development models, as opposed to a more generic national or even international, in order to take the context into perspective when you develop such models. And the other focus, as some of you already know, it is on the sustainable development of small and medium-sized enterprises. And with sustainable, I don't only mean green, I mean, the sustainable future, which includes all the key areas that we mentioned, including resilience, productivity, leadership development, and so on, everything that makes business sustainable, especially during periods of crisis. Now, as part of this strategic plan, and in order to underpin this vision, 4 years ago, we joined the Small Business Charter Award, which Small Business Charter was developed with the Association of Business Schools, and was one of Lord Young's initiative in order to put together, to create a network of business schools to support small businesses by working with business schools, both in terms of educational entrepreneurial development, but also providing the support that entrepreneurs need in order to survive and then grow. So now the SBC, the Small Business Charter, has got 33 business schools, including Aston and Birmingham and Sheffield and a number of business schools. So the Association of Business Schools came to us and said, we've got a real issue here. We've got small businesses which are in need for a leadership development program to help them predominantly to develop, to improve their productivity, build resilience, both organizational and individuals, employee resilience, and ensure their sustainable future. So say, are you interested to be part of this bid? And 20 business schools or so said yes, of course, we'd be absolutely delighted to do that. And the Association of Business Schools led the base bid, and which was successful after, as you would expect, a lot of back and forth. Now, what's important to highlight is that each of the business schools had different strengths and different things to offer. And we all decided that we'd take a local stroke regional focus in delivering. So eight of the business schools, we decided to lead different themes, different workshops that they are going to be offered to small businesses. In our case, we could have picked any, but we picked mainly the understanding consumers, the consumer insights, and understanding markets. Other business schools picked up like productivity or innovation or operations management, which we developed. And the idea is that each of the 8 business schools will create some of the material and will create a library that everyone could, out of the 20 or even more business schools, could use later on to deliver. And what we agreed, it was that even though the development of each of the workshops was going to be with local insight, then each of the business schools would try to deliver a program which is similar to Goldman Sachs, like more or less a little bit standardized, so will not have huge variation. Where the variation and the difference would be, it wasn't going to be so much on the delivery, but was going to be all on the peer-to-peer learning, which was mentioned earlier on, where you identify each of the group's needs, you create this sort of community of practice, and you do like in a way more or less a deliberative engagement of the issues that you want to address based on each of the workshops. Before I hand over to Natalie to go through some of the details of the programs, the main sort of strands that in terms of research that run through these programs is, as I said, productivity, responsibility, sustainability, resilience. And in a way that looks both, which is different to a lot of other programs, both the needs of the entrepreneur, founder, CFO, but also the needs of the employees working and the contextual needs that employees would have in terms of building resilience, especially going through crisis. For us, what we got now for Leeds Beckett and the Leeds Business School, we have made a promise in the first instance to put together 2 cohorts of 20 businesses. Natalie will correct me if I'm wrong. And this is what it is important now, to find the right mix in order to have the maximum impact as to which businesses to put together to deliver this 10-week program and get the best outcome. Because based on the grant, I'm sure that there will be other opportunities for funding. If we get this right now, then we can replicate across the board. Over to you, Natalie.
Thank you, George. So just to give you a bit of an overview, Small Business Leadership Programme, it's part of a £20 million COVID recovery package from the government, from BEIS. It's designed to support bounce back, but it's really designed to embed strategic sustainable growth and business planning. As George said, it is a national programme. It's actually designed to support the senior leaders of a business, obviously, support with the impact of COVID. It's a 10-week fully funded programme. There's no charge to the business whatsoever. It's going to be delivered online at present, as you can imagine. So we'll deliver that through 90-minute webinar sessions, and then there'll be some online learning materials. There'll be a knowledge bank that's being created, which will be accessible 24/7, and then there'll be peer-to-peer sessions to follow that up. So the programme has been developed, as we've said, with a consortium of business schools and accredited by the Small Business Charter and fully funded by BEIS. George has alluded to, but these were the core themes that the business schools felt that needed to be running and underpinning all of the modules that you'll see. I'm not going to read this slide by slide. I'll share this after so people can have this as a resource. This is basically the outline of the curriculum that people felt were the core skills that needed to be embedded here in order to better inform an action plan for future. As I've said, this was designed with a consortium of 20 business schools with real sort of expertise in this area. And I think this is why BEIS and the government felt that this was a bit of a differentiator for this business support programme, because it has been directly delivered and designed by academics in this field. But also, George is correct, we are wanting to give this a regional flavour and a regional focus. So we will be tailoring this content, although it will have a national standard. We'll bring in regional case studies and regional expert speakers where appropriate. So for us, we're going to be delivering 2 cohorts, up to 20 businesses. The great thing about this programme, when we look at the eligibility criteria, you have to be an SME based in England, employ up to at least five people. But the critical thing for me, where other funding sometimes falls down, is that we can actually support retail and hospitality. And if we think about our regional business makeup, that's absolutely critical here. So some of the other sort of programs that we deliver, those businesses are excluded, whereas they're not here. And it's important to say that, up to 2 decision makers from each of these businesses can take part. Our cohort will commence sort of late October, so we've got plenty of time to recruit. I will be sharing some content, as I said, this PowerPoint and any other materials after. So if people do want to cascade those down to relevant individuals, that's absolutely fantastic, and we welcome the support. I just wanted to take the opportunity very quickly just to sort of highlight the bigger picture for us in terms of where this sits in our portfolio, and just to sort of say, as an academic institution, we are really committed to supporting the inclusive growth agenda. We've all agreed that people, place and productivity, have never been so important, and we're really, really delighted to be able to add this national programme into the existing portfolio. And as an academic institution, we genuinely do pride ourselves on delivering sort of impact through the knowledge transfer and the translational research that we feed into policy, practice and industry. And that's why I wanted to take the opportunity really just to showcase that this is part of a wider piece of business support that the university and primarily the business school have to offer. I know, most of you will be aware of the other programs that we deliver, like Adventure, the Accelerate program. A lot of those have been pivoted to ensure that the content that we are delivering is supportive of the current pandemic and the business needs at whichever sort of point in that journey the businesses are. We've worked very collaboratively during this time. We've contributed to the new MIT LEAP program, so we've shared a lot of material to support businesses in that. We're working very closely with Connecting Innovation colleagues and all of the growth managers, because what we feel is important is that as a region, if we put the business at the heart and we work collaboratively, everybody has strengths in the programs that they have to offer to deliver. And what we think is critical and one of the strengths of Leeds Business School is we have a keen ability to embed those business capabilities. So when we think about innovation, it's actually important that we think about those small innovations to businesses, you know, the role of the board. Do we have a clear marketing strategy? Have we thought about sustainability? And those thinkings and methodologies can be innovative, but lay that fundamental groundwork to then allow those businesses to go on and engage in further, wider innovation. So this, when I send the PowerPoint round, provides you a direct link to the Small Business Leadership Programme website, where businesses can enter their details to register interest. They just need to select Leeds Business School as the provider. We will then follow this up. What's important for this programme is we will have a key account manager, which will stay directly with those businesses throughout the lifetime of the programme to ensure that they complete all sections and get to the end of the programme and produce an action plan. That's it from us. If there's any questions, happy to take those, and my contact details are attached to the PowerPoint.
What I was going to add is that with the peer-to-peer learning, which we say that, you know, that it is the second part of each of the deliverables, you know, 8 times, it's only the beginning of the relationship, because we are a business school for business.
Yes.
Really, it's not like a transactional relationship with the businesses. So as soon as they form this relationship, we'll be happy to facilitate the community of practice for as long as it goes, because we can see that other benefits could emerge from that, either giving live projects with our students and working with our students, apprenticeships, internships, all sorts of different things that we could do together, which would not have an impact on the bottom line of the businesses, but will have a significant impact in what we're trying to do.
Very good. Yes, thank you, Natalie and George. And we're asking for feedback now. I'll come to Amir in a moment, and there may be others too. My feedback is really congratulations on winning this. It's a good recognition of the excellent work that you've been doing in Leeds Beckett for all the time, and good for everybody on this call to see, you know, how to the forefront you are of this nationally. And the other bit of feedback is that we are very aware how much Leeds City Region needs this. Mm-hmm. Having all the SMEs that we do here, and there was some evidence collected, I think probably a couple of years ago now, but I imagine it's still current, which is as much as 40% of our SMEs don't have a business plan.
Yeah.
So, you know, what you're providing here and the way that you're supporting people peer to peer, looking for action plans, it's all really, really good from our point of view in terms of addressing that dire need that we're already aware of, and just really good that this tool is coming to hand. Amir, to you.
Yeah, just following on from what you were saying there, Andrew. I mean, I think I think it's a brilliant initiative, and I think the approach and depth of it is really, really good. I think there's the fact that you're aiming at being local and responding to local challenges is really good and really interesting. I think it was just something that was said sort of really towards the end, which was the fact that the process by which people apply and get on this course. I think the issue is for a lot of the businesses that are in this region are not in the position where they know what they don't know. Yeah. And they're therefore not in a position to know that by going on this course, they can thereby get benefit from it. And the people who do know that, and the people who are the ones that simply apply, essentially are the ones, as I alluded to earlier, are the ones that generally will accelerate, and the ones that don't are the ones that and we actually sort of inadvertently widen the divide between the ones that are engaged and the ones that are not. And again, I think that there's a really fundamental but really simple thing, which is how do you get the breadth of businesses on here, and how do they get to understand the benefit that they get from this? And there's so many smaller businesses, and I deal with a lot of them, who are so busy firefighting and so busy dealing with the day-to-day that they don't see the horizon scanning. They don't recognize the importance of these things. And actually, I feel that there's almost needs to be a bit of an interpretation service between where they are currently and what you're offering, and for them to be guided towards it with an understanding of where they can benefit from it. And I just wondered what your views on that was.
Amira, I actually share that. We're doing a lot of work. There isn't just the link. We're doing a lot of work in terms of that SME business engagement piece, looking at the different sectors, engaging with our partners through our different networks. You know, that, like I said before, the growth managers, we have university business centres out in Calderdale and Wakefield who we're very regularly engaging with businesses. We have a dedicated business engagement team that do that, very much that hand-holding piece, that you know, work with those businesses, understand which is the right program for them. These are people that may have, you know, come on some of our development programs that we've held in the past. I think somebody mentioned earlier, when you look at things sector by sector, I think this is a great program because actually it's open to any sector. We've done a lot of work on productivity where we've engaged with the manufacturing sector. One of the things that was highly interesting for me was we targeted businesses that hadn't had any funding or necessarily been on programs before. And when you spoke to the directors, considered that we're productive, we're doing really well, you know, we have no issues, yes, we've got a plan. Actually, when they engaged with us as an academic institution and came on a program and we started to look at their continuous improvement strategies, first visit of one of our academics in one of these businesses, they went through new KPIs, looking at data that they wouldn't necessarily have interrogated. And the director said, "You've just saved me 60 grand. That machine's working at 10% capacity and I was going to buy another one." So it is just that mindset, and it is about actually really getting under the skin of the business. And that's why I was saying this key account management piece, that face-to-face, well, online face-to-face, that interactive piece is going to be so critical. And George is right. We want this to be the start of a journey. Any business that starts to engage with us, we want to continue to work with them to pass them to other programs and colleagues in the region where appropriate. I genuinely mean that. When the business is at the heart of this, it's about learning what they need and where we can help guide them to get that.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yes, very good.
But also, as I posted in the chat, I think that we also need the referrals. We need someone to pro them, you know, who they trust that this is something of value. And if you have the commitment from the entrepreneur, the owner, then I think that, you know, they will realize the benefits from this type of products. Otherwise, you know, they will come and because they are not paying as well, they will not appreciate the value added.
Yeah.
Good. Well, we're certainly getting the request for us around this virtual table to get the message out of what you're offering, and I'm sure we can do that. Simon Wright, I failed to come back to you on the previous item, but it may be that you have some remark on this, and perhaps any of the councillors also may have networks. Maybe Councillor Panda or others may have networks that can really help us get the message out about what's available here.
Yeah, and yeah, thanks, Andrew. And it does sort of link back to the comments that I was going to make off the back of the previous discussion that we had. And I think Brian's comment around sort of access to bounce back loans and the time taken, I suppose from my point of view, was a little surprising. I would hope that that's the exception rather than the norm, because in effect, I can only speak from personal experience, but clearly within the rules that have been set out by the governments, all banks have worked incredibly hard to push money out the door as quickly as possible within the process that's been defined, and I think that's been very successful. But I think what it has created, and what we clearly see and has been alluded to, is in effect a false position where clearly a lot of cash has been pushed out into the local economy, into businesses, means that if you look at failure rates and those businesses right now, I think the position is probably not a true position of the struggles that businesses had. And as we start to trade through this and businesses open up, and the various government schemes, be it furlough or obviously tax deferrals, start to move away, then clearly cash is going to start to run out for these businesses. And I think the key thing here is the ongoing engagement with the banks, ongoing conversation, because there's still opportunities with regards to ongoing services around capital repayment holidays and overdrafts and other support banks can give. But that engagement is key, and that continuous conversation with their banks to talk about their current position. I think alongside that, with the UK sort of UK Finance Task Force, we're clearly looking through how we manage forbearance, how we manage that business support for businesses that struggle to repay the debt that they have, because the stats that I see says that show probably 60 to 70% of those businesses that taken out bounce back loans are first time borrowers, right? So aren't used to holding debt of that magnitude and size, and there's a clear sort of commitment that's coming their way in 12 months' time that they're not used to. So business support, the ongoing referrals into schemes such as what George has spent some time talking us through is going to be critical. And I think the message for me and the other banks is that we are constantly engaging with our customers. We need to ensure that we continue to do that and signpost not just our support, but the likes of Leeds Beckett University, the Growth Hub, and other areas around how we can support them moving forward. So I think the commitment's absolutely there from our point of view.
Good, thank you for that, Simon. I think that's that. I'm sure that's what George and Natalie were looking for. Brian, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we talked about furlough, and it's related to the banks, Simon. We're going to get lots of people entering the labour market, and a large proportion of them will want to set up their own business. So whenever there's an economic downturn, you see an increase in new firm formation rates. And I've been picking up some feedback from individuals wanting to set up their own businesses that the banks currently, the main clearing banks, aren't opening any new business accounts. And I just wondered if there was any feedback from the banking sector about when that might change. I know some of the new challenger banks, like Tide and a couple of other sort of fringe players, still in the business of opening business bank accounts, but the main clearing banks like RBS, HSBC, and others are not accepting any new business bank account openings. Clearly, it's a factor to do with the fact they're inundated with with bounce backs and capacity issues. But I just wondered if you've got any more
I think
feedback on that.
Point. Yeah, I think it hits on the point that you just made there. But if you look at all the major banks and what they will sort of clearly call out is that their first priority has been supporting existing customers and ensuring that those customers back with them get the necessary support. Obviously, through the pandemic, and that has led a number to say, well, because of that prioritisation, we will focus our time and effort first on that. And as the volume has been so significant on bounce back loans and supporting them in that way, then that's where the focus has been. We are seeing volumes starting to fall away. We have got a clear sort of articulated sort of end date that's been worked towards with regards to bounce back loans moving forward. So I think you would hope that banks would start reopening their doors to open new accounts from that side of things now and start to support businesses in that way. I think there will always be an openness if they have a personal account with an organisation to go speak to them in the first instance because the relationship is there. And for me, the door will be probably a little bit more open than if they were coming forward to a bank for the first time. But I think it's been just driven by that need and the volumes, that need to support existing customer and the volumes that have come through. But I would hope that would start to ease through. And I can only speak from a Virgin Money perspective, but yes, we have seen volumes, but we continue to open accounts for new customers. So we aren't one that's in effect closed our doors to new accounts on the way through. Be it that we acknowledge for some customers it does take that bit longer just because of the volumes that we're seeing.
Okay. Any other feedback or offers of help to the Leeds Beckett folks? Okay, good. Well, hopefully that's been good for you, George and Natalie. It's certainly very great for us to hear, the good work that you've been doing and you're about to embark on. Very good luck with it. Please feel free to stay on the call, and I'm sure the next items may be of interest to you as well anyway. But thank you very much again.
Thank you.
So with that, we'll move on to item 9, good work standard. James Flanagan's going to talk to us about this one, and it was new to me when I read it in this paperwork. Maybe others had seen it before, but I hadn't. So I think, James, you're looking to get initial views on where this is going, so if people can be ready to give some feedback to James at the end of this, that would be good.
Andrew, it's Ian. I'm gonna just say a few words and then just to introduce James and so on. So James is the policy manager responsible for inclusive growth for the LEP, and leads our support for the inclusive growth panel. Also to note that obviously we're fortunate to have Councillor Pandor on this panel as well, who chairs the inclusive growth panel. So this is a key part of that agenda that Councillor Pandor is leading, and where this proposal comes from is the increasing focus we're putting through our inclusive growth framework, and also in the economic recovery plan on jobs and on good work. And so this proposal to work up a good work standard, to rely on a good work standard, works on kind of two levels. Firstly, it allows us to express what we mean as a LEP, what we mean by good work, and what should feature in that. And it also links through to the inclusive growth and sustainability conditions that we've put on business support to date, and it's an opportunity to formalise that against a fixed standard. There's a number of options about how we could progress this, what we could include within it, whether we use an existing model because others have been working on this, or whether it's something we need to make bespoke for West Yorkshire. And this is just an initial paper to get the panel's views. The Inclusive Growth panel are meeting next week, and views from this panel will be very welcome to be put into that debate. James, is there anything further you wanted to say on this?
I think that covers it. Thanks, Ian. And it's just really open, of course, for views and perspectives. I think probably the main headline thing is that there is a good work challenge within the city region. I think only 29% of all jobs which are designated is not, they're not in good work. So there's a real challenge there, and associated challenges as well set out within the report. So certainly welcome views. Other people are doing something similar. So can we piggyback on that, develop something bespoke, or what's the best way forward, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, we'll look for some responses to that. Councillor Pandor might want to say something. My question, James, would be, and we sort of alluded to it earlier, do you think that we can weave the productivity strand into what you're doing, or do you see that really as being just sort of alongside it?
Thanks, Chair. I think this has come from the perspective of inclusive growth, but embedded firmly within inclusive growth is the notion of productivity. So I think the two really work incredibly well together. So we should be trying to get that synergy and driving both agendas hand in hand. It'd be a massive missed opportunity if we didn't try and do that, I think.
Okay, really good to hear that. Yes.
Can I say something, Andrew?
Of course, go ahead.
Happy to support where I can, but I've got so many things on at the moment, not least with the pandemic. That if there's anything I can do, I'm happy to help. But to be fair, literally, I'm inundated with the current coronavirus pandemic. My day is just morphing into one. My weekend just morphing into one. But where I can help, right, just give me a shout. Happy to help. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. No problem. Absolutely. Any other remarks from panel members? Yes, Councillor Scullion.
Jane, Chair, please. Actually, the phrase good work is one that I know and that's been around and is used. And what I thought was useful about this paper was actually the attempt to define what we mean by good work, because I know that we use it in investment panel all the time. And actually, good work means different things to different people, and having some kind of standard that we can measure against, I think is quite useful, really. And I would be very interested to see what they have in London and elsewhere, to see if there are existing standards that we can use rather than developing something that's completely new. Let's piggyback, let's recycle what's already out there if it's useful.
Good, sure, I'd echo that too. And also, let's use what's out there already, but also recognising that we had quite a lot done already by the Inclusive Growth Panel and the criteria, for example, that we were starting to set for grants and that kind of thing. It's scarcely new to us, but it's quite an attractive way of making it into a more kind of visible positive, isn't it? Yes, Peter O'Brien.
Thanks, Chair. James, just wondering, I mean, I absolutely support this initiative, and I sit on the Inclusive Growth Panel as well. And I think the pandemic has brought home to us the real strong relationship between the labour market, the economy, and health and well-being and inequalities. I just wonder though, is there a sense of adopting a particular sectoral perspective to some of this? I'm not saying that you would kind of discount and not include all elements of the economy. I'm just thinking about something that's particularly targeted. Is that some thinking at this stage?
I think given we've got such a diverse economy, the feeling was we should be aiming pretty much for all sectors and indeed all sizes of organisation, from SME right through to the biggest outfits and corporations. So really covering the three sectors of private, public and third, actually, where we can. Sounds ambitious, but I think that's the real value. There needs to be good work in all of those sectors, and we need to try and promote that.
Any other remarks from panel members? Just one more from me then. There's no reference in it at the moment in the paper to the green challenges that we face, and maybe that's deliberate and maybe that's appropriate to keep it separate. But it seems to me that good work should really include a proper respect for the planet and where we're trying to take things. And since that's such a key theme for all of us in everything, it's a bit of a miss at the moment, I would say. Okay, Henry, did you want to say something?
I guess the only other thing, Andrew, is that obviously we have the inclusive growth commitments that this panel has debated and discussed and agreed before in terms of grant recipients. You know, what we expect from businesses who access public grant investment, and obviously some of those are social returns, some are environmental. I think this really does neatly align to that work and maybe take it to the next level, whereby we've got something that's a bit more substantial and sustainable for businesses to work towards, but it also does leave the businesses with a clear benefit and and some sort of accreditation really that suggests that that may well be beneficial to them for business purposes, because sometimes some of the inclusive growth commitments for us feels a little bit like they're just doing the bare minimum really. So I just think we need this. Feels like a natural evolvement of where we are at the moment, to something that's a bit more substantial.
Yeah, there's a couple of comments. Thank you, Henry. There's a couple of comments in the chat about whether there's anything here for the Leeds Beckett leadership training, and whether some thought about good work could be or maybe is already incorporated into that. I don't know whether either of you want to comment on that.
I think that we could certainly look at that within respect of the peer-to-peer discussions. We can certainly weave that into that. Like I sort of explained, the core content of this is sort of delivered nationally, and we can put a regional context onto that, but I'm sure we could certainly include that in there. With the 24/7 sort of knowledge bank repository, I'm sure if there are pieces that we want to include in terms of best practice or standards, then we can absolutely include that as well. There's also going to be an area on the platform to share further information. So as I've said before, other programs and other information, other documents, other shared information can be highlighted from our region on there as well. So yeah, happy to support any way we can.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you for Mike and Richard Paxman for raising that.
And we can do something standalone as well, which we can offer to businesses without being a problem as part of our engagement strategy. So if there's something specific that we can put, and those they are part of the program, part of the 40, we can benefit, but we can also offer it wider as part of the business engagement piece. So I'm happy
very good,
to have
George.
a conversation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think people have had their say on that one, and thank you very much for that, James. We'll move with that on to item 10, trade and investment. David, would you like to take us through that one?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll give a summary really about how we've pivoted, where our focus is now. We'll talk about, give a flavour for some of the trends that we're experiencing during the pandemic, and then end with a little bit of context around our approach to two very topical items, one being the relationship with China and the Chinese economy and the work we're doing there, and the second, the creative industries. So firstly, as everybody has had to do, we've had to pivot our focus onto those opportunities in sectors that are performing well and providing us with opportunities to get positive results and aid the economic recovery. We call it the pivot strategy, but basically it focuses on 5 core work streams. One is the ongoing need to communicate information around future trade deals as that emerges. And Roger Marsh has joined one of the free trade agreement steering committees, which you've probably seen in the press, but also looking at strategic export opportunities around where we have a capability as a region, as businesses, and where the sector is performing well and accelerating in terms of some of the trends that COVID has inspired. We're looking now, we're embarking upon 3 export initiatives relating around creative industries, especially some of our cultural exports that could go far and wide. You've probably seen on the TV at the moment that Yorkshire programmes with Yorkshire in it are absolutely flying in terms of popularity, and local content in foreign markets goes down well. So we want to look at something to aid the creative industries to get their cultural and creative exports accelerated. Also in terms of textiles, a partnership with the Future Fashion Factory at University of Leeds, and many firms have come forward with details of their organisations and their specialist capabilities that we can showcase and start getting out amongst the networks into overseas markets through DIT and contacts that we have. And of course, healthcare, medtech in particular. We're refreshing the region's medtech index of businesses. We've used it for Arab Health in the past. We're updating that, and we'll leverage that to show the high quality offer that our region's businesses have. Much of the medtech events have gone on virtual, and we want to get on them messaging platforms and get in those events. We're talking to parts of America, Texas, about a bio bridge, for example, where we can work at forming relationships on both sides, the states and in our region. We're also trying to capitalize on some sector-specific opportunities in terms of inward investment, and there is opportunities for inward investment out there. It's not all doom and gloom. Some sectors are moving quickly to alternative methods of delivery, and some are performing well. So we've got to tap into them. Food and drink is one of those. I mean, COVID has, been that event that has exposed weaknesses in the food and drink supply chain, a lack of resilience. We're getting the major retailers together in a partnership with Greater Manchester as well to talk to them about where they've got weaknesses in their supply chain, to identify if we can go after some of those businesses to come here and produce domestically. We've also seen the huge retail digital transformation has been, it's been ongoing for a long time, but it's accelerated. It's forced retailers to invest further and at pace in developing new technology platforms to support online retail. That's something we're good at as a region, helping businesses develop new technology platforms. So we're identifying those businesses and making a play for them. Also, digital health, data analytics and medtech. The UK digital health market they reckon it's worth about $28 billion. And there are a lot of people looking to invest here to get into part of that capability that our businesses offer. Opportunities in Israel in particular that's emerged as a big investor into the UK. And there are some VC funds there and some good relationships developing through Nexus, for example, with the Israeli digital health medtech market. So we want to position Leeds City Region as a real viable alternative for those sectors. And smart cities, again, it's a very broad sector, but now more than ever, governments, businesses that are operating in urban environments are looking at utilising smart technologies, and our businesses can provide a lot of that. So we're looking at building the profile there. The other opportunity that has emerged, and you'll have seen this, is capitalising on further north shoring and reshoring trends. The teams in amongst the property agents and the regular property forums picking up hints and tips on how to market the region in terms of businesses that are reevaluating their footprints. We're also getting quite a lot of leads from the property agents. It's starting to pick up. We're developing a new suite of messages for intermediaries to use about the region that plays well to the environment we're in now, especially relating to COVID. And we're doing more lead generation than ever before. As you can imagine, we've bought new services like LinkedIn Talent Insights, which allows us to look at large technology businesses which may have clusters of influential staff based in our region, which gives us a hook to then speak to them about potentially having a presence here. We've also done a massive push for the next 3 months with animations, combined it with London Tech Week, which is happening now, on #welcome. If a firm is wanting to relocate, the grants that we apply there through the Soft Landing Fund, #welcome, is being pushed quite intensively. We're also maintaining close relationships. Henry touched on this, with the larger businesses that provide a lot of employment in the region. As they come off furlough, as the dust settles, a lot of them are now unearthing some quite strategic deliberations around what they do in the future. And that's giving us quite a few inquiries and propositions to be making to those businesses about why to do it here or to do more here, as opposed to not. And we've got to make sure that we as a region come out on the right side of those decisions. So it's good that they're getting on our radar. The other thing we're busy with is shaping and influencing the Department for International Trades and the Northern Powerhouse trade and investment activities. There's a new investment and export strategy due out soon. There's a trade and investment proposition submitted by MP11 asking for 63 million to support trade and investment in the North. We're working up more detail on that. There's a new investment office being established within the government department, which Lord Grimstone has kind of spearheaded around getting a kind of finance mindset into the department to help attract and incentivize inward investors. And we're looking at kind of how some of the funds that were allocated for levelling up in the last budget announcements can be used in this region, trying to get some additional resource into America that can just represent the Northern Powerhouse, and some help assessing the international trade landscape and identifying any gaps in the region through additional resource. Just something else that's worth, this year so far, we've had the same amount of inquiries as we had last year. But what is going to be harder is actually winning those investments. That's partly because we're trying harder to generate leads because we have to. But it's going to be a real test of our competitiveness in terms of putting a value proposition forward from this region. And that's something that we're excited about doing. There's obviously a lot of talk about relationships between the UK and China at the moment. I just want the big panel to be assured that we're paying close attention to that. We still must acknowledge that China is a good investor and trading partner into the UK, and it recently became the 3rd largest trading partner for the UK. 2019 passed 100 billion of bilateral trade and investment. It's a huge market, and I think what we're doing is we're acknowledging that there's some senior government dialogue taking place at the moment that's quite complex. But at the same time, there is strategic dialogue going on with multiple nations across the world, and it shouldn't affect trade and investment partnerships. However, we've been very, very careful and speaking all the time with our civic partners in China, and that will continue. We're also doing something around Leeds Digital Festival around international tech companies, which we're pleased to have the MD of Alibaba in Europe be our keynote speaker. And a lot of the international tech companies that we've met over the last few years will be participating in that. So that's given us a good kind of way of keeping those relationships warm. And then finally, I'd just say creative industries, it's a sector that's been hard hit because of the nature of them in terms of self-employment, small businesses. We moved quickly decided that an intervention was required to support this sector, especially the TV and film production sector, while they were suspended from producing new programmes. And we did a small grant scheme of around £250,000, which benefited 14 businesses to help them continue to develop new ideas during the time when production was suspended during lockdown. And we think that's created around over 120 freelance roles in this region, and about 950 days of work is pushed out into the sector over the next 6 months. So it was extremely successful, and I think should be noted, and there'll be some communication going out soon on that. Thank you, Andrew. Good.
Thank you very much, David. Any feedback on that? I mean, it's very full and thorough as ever, David. Richard Paxman in the text chat has said that there may be a point about the British American Business Council, David. That might be something that could be looked into, perhaps.
Yeah, we know them and have worked with them in the past.
Okay, good. Good. Well, if there isn't any more remarks on that, people will have read the report. So thanks indeed for that, David. I'm just going to win a little bit of time here and pass on to the next item, where we've got the innovation framework, which Sarah is going to lead us through, Sarah Bowes. And we've then got two substantive items on MIT and the health tech. So Sarah, also, if we could win a little bit of time here, because I don't really want to cut either of the other inputs short if we can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I did have some slides, but I won't go through them. But essentially, the paper says it all. We're proposing to develop a new innovation strategy for the city region. Our last innovation strategy was from 2014, so a little bit out of date now. But the plan was to incorporate all our innovation ambitions as part of our local industrial strategy. As Ian said earlier, that's been paused. We're not quite clear on the status of that or the direction of travel on that. So in terms of securing future investment and securing future kind of whether it's shared prosperity fund, whether it's gain share, whether it's whatever funding comes down the line, we feel we need a standalone innovation strategy to set out our collective ambitions, our shared ambitions around innovation. Starting with what do we mean by innovation? What's our focus? We've done an awful lot of work to develop the local industrial strategy around this. So the evidence has been already worked up, the priorities have already been kind of developed. What we need to do now is relook at that in the light of COVID. Obviously, as we talked about earlier, productivity is still really, really important, but there are some kind of immediate issues that we need to help, and innovation can help to address some of those issues. So recast the framework and the priorities in the light of COVID, and then go through an extensive consultation period to make sure we're getting as much feedback from key stakeholders and people generally across the city region for our innovation ambitions. It's a really good opportunity to make sure we're doing this, we're embedding inclusivity and diversity as part of our innovation ambitions, and working through to our net zero ambitions as well, because innovation always has a key role to play in that. It'll be a key role of the West Yorkshire Innovation Network to oversee and get involved in this, as well as the big panel. And we'll come back to the next meeting and talk a bit more about the West Yorkshire Innovation Network and connecting innovation and where that's got to. But it was really just a really quick item to kind of get a steer from panel members as to whether this was a good idea and how they want to be involved, and any things we need to be looking out for as we proceed.
Good, thank you, Sarah. Does anybody want to give feedback? I mean, my feedback is that it's very, very welcome, especially since you know, it's obviously something that hasn't been updated that recently. It's the first letter in our panel name, so clearly we're all interested in it and we want to see it well done. It seems like a really good time to be doing it. It fits with so many of the things that we're doing now, and the fact that it's a slightly wider remit than just this group, I think, is also very welcome. Does anybody else have a remark on that? Okay, well, with that then I will pass on to a related point, and one of the things that no doubt that we'll be coming back to as well as part of the innovation framework is the work that MIT, REAP and the Leeds team have been doing. And Martin Stowe, I should imagine, is it you, Martin, who's going to lead us on this? This is quite a large effort that's been made over the last 2 years, and it was always planned that it would go regional at about this point. So this is part of the effort that Martin and his team are making to engage with the region and show how the work that the team have been doing in terms of how to support entrepreneurs, new to the world type entrepreneurs, how we can fit in with that as a region and really get behind this. Over to you, Martin.
That's great. Thank you very much, Andrew, for the introduction. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So what I'd like to do is just literally take you through very quickly a summary and just a background to MIT REAP. As Andrew mentioned, this has been a 2-year journey. I've been part of the core team, but I've just literally taken over the champion role for the team. That was being led by Lisa Roberts, who now obviously has moved on. And I'd also like to introduce David Smith, who has been doing a great job as the delivery group leader, really driving the 2 interventions that we're going to talk about and being able to deliver those. And again, Andrew has set the scene very nicely. This was always a Leeds City Region programme, but we deliberately decided to focus on Leeds initially to get some traction and to drive momentum. And the intention was always to come back and to expand this within the region. And the timing is perfect to do that now. And what we're basically asking for is your endorsement, particularly of the Leeds City Region engagement and expansion of this work, but clearly your help and your support as well. So just to give you a very brief background, I know some of you are already aware of this, but again, there's a number of new members of the panel. This has been presented previously, probably about 18 months ago. But this essentially is a program which is run by the Sloan Management School at MIT. There's been 50+ regions worldwide that have been through this program over about 6 or 7 years. And about 2 years ago, the university, the University of Leeds took a leading role to actually initiate the application process and to drive this forward for the benefit of the broader regional innovation ecosystem. I'm not going to go through all of the detail, but the key elements of this is a senior multi-stakeholder model. And as you can see, each team has 5 key stakeholders that need to be represented in the region. The heart of this is the entrepreneur. So the focus of this program is very much around the entrepreneur. So clearly, entrepreneurs are well represented in the team. But also universities have a big part to play, local government, corporates, and then investors and risk capital. The other key thing about this program is it's very much evidence-based. So the starting point, and I'll talk a little bit more about the journey, and I'll give you sort of a 2-minute overview of the journey we've been through over the last 2 years. But again, it's very much based on data and understanding the strengths and the competitive advantage. So what differentiates your innovation ecosystem? And that, hence, once you understand that in a data-based way, focused on the entrepreneur, you can start to understand how you want to drive and develop that further. And I've already mentioned, we formed a delivery group, again, which has multi-stakeholders represented on it. And this is the group that really have been developing the strategy and then more recently implementing that strategy with our first intervention. So the other key piece about this program is the whole concept of IDEs, innovation-driven enterprises. So this program isn't about every SME or startup in the region. The whole idea about this program is to focus, to encourage and nurture the development of these IDEs. So IDEs, and this is very much an MIT definition, are basically these new to world inventions. They have a clear competitive advantage. They have enormous growth potential. And essentially have the ability to be able to scale and access global markets. And the reason why it's so important to focus on IDEs in a region is because they disproportionately have a massive impact on employment. And we've talked about productivity growth and innovation. So the classic work that's been done is one highly skilled job created within an IDE startup can lead to the creation of 8 to 10 further jobs in the wider innovation ecosystem. So ultimately, the idea is if you focus on IDEs, then it's going to have, I say, a disproportionate impact on the wider innovation ecosystem. And the whole program has that concept. The challenge comes down to how do you identify IDEs at an early stage? So when you're looking at startups, at what point do you actually say, and what are the signs that demonstrate that they have the potential to be an IDE? But the focus of the program essentially are these high growth tech companies. We've mentioned it was been a 2-year program, which we started in October 2018. The first stage, as I mentioned, was very much around collecting data, interviewing, surveying entrepreneurs within the region that understand the innovation ecosystem. From that, we then developed a strategy. That then has led into delivery, and we're very much now at a stage, particularly this year, where we've been developing interventions, and David will talk about those. But essentially, one intervention called LEAP, which is all for budding entrepreneurs, was something that we developed very quickly in response to COVID-19, recognizing there's going to be a whole load of first-time entrepreneurs in the market. And then the second intervention, which is going to be piloted January next year, is called Build. And again, I'll let David explain those in greater detail. But I guess we've now moved from the stage of developing, approving a strategy to now actually delivery. So it's quite a critical moment, I think, in the evolution of this program. And we formally graduate from the program in October next month. That's our 4th workshop, but that's really when the work starts. And we're now focusing on how we ensure that this is sustainable and has the biggest possible impact within the broader region. So the status, and I've probably mentioned most of these, we're at this stage where it's very much, we're using seed funding. We're talking about interim delivery of our 2 interventions. I'll let David talk more about Build and what we're doing, and also LEAP, which we launched a couple of weeks ago, which has been very well received. We've done quite a bit of work around our branding strategy and starting to build awareness of what we're doing and engagement. And we're now, and again, David will talk about how we're planning to engage the broader region over the next few months. And as I mentioned, a lot of effort now is going into what does the backbone organisation look like, and how can we ensure that this is sustainable and can be scaled up to have a bigger impact in the region. So that was a very swift sort of overview. Let me pass now across to David, who will go into more detail about actually what we've done and those 2 interventions.
Thanks, Martin. Can I just ask you to, I'll cut through the animation on this, just so that I'm conscious of time moving on. That's fine, thank you. So this really sums up the why, how and what of our MIT REAP, so the strategy that we're adopting, that the team has developed. In terms of our purpose, our focus is very much on inspiring a much broader range of entrepreneurs from more varied backgrounds. Now, it's one of the things that characterizes startup ecosystems is they're typically white and male. So that's one of the key drivers that we, the team, are focused on. And then the other part of it is championing what we're calling at the moment socially useful innovations. So this isn't just about creating those IDEs that Martin's talked about. What we want to do is create an ecosystem or develop our existing ecosystem that it supports a more varied entrepreneur base, and also it has very much a focus on IDs with a purpose. You know, you've probably heard all kinds of phrases that are used to describe these kinds of businesses: tech for good, you know, B Corp, corporates is one that's come up recently, purpose driven, all those kind of things essentially are in that space. And that's the way we think of differentiating our startup ecosystem. So the how is the team leads that Martin talked about. We call that principle of multi-stakeholders with a focus on entrepreneurs, and also ourselves operating like a startup as well. So the delivery group has tried to encompass that agile working that's necessary to get something done. You know, very much a collaborative approach in terms of how we've gone about it. And then the what, which I'll talk about in a second, is our focus through the evidencing we spent 9 to 12 months on is very much at the ideation early startup stage. That's where there's a significant gap in our ecosystem. And specifically about driving the volume and diversity of people and ideas, and then also turning the best of those ideas into investable propositions. Just one more point to make on this slide is that we have been working with the business support service, with the growth service, to make sure that, as well as developing, well, the new interventions that we're developing join up with the existing support. So that we make sure that the entrepreneurs have a seamless journey through it, because that's one of the things that came out of the evidencing again, that it's knowing where to go, who to talk to, so we can make sure there's an effective handover from one area of support to another. Thanks, Martin. So in terms of how we look at the position the startup ecosystem about joining up existing support, we think very much about the growth stages of a business, so the ideation, pre-launch, startup phase, and then scale up and mature. So as I said, our focus is very much on the first two stages there. So our strategy is to start wide to drive volume and diversity, which I talked about, and then beyond that, start to focus on IDEs, but sector agnostic, and then potentially to be even more specific after that. So Martin, can you just press if you keep pressing until we get all the items up. Thank you. So the two interventions I'll talk about in a second one. The first one is LEAP, which is very much about that going as wide as possible. This is where BUILD, which is our other intervention, sits. And then there are just examples, well, one example of an intervention that exists in the city region, which is Propel at YH, which really follows nicely from BUILD. So that's a sector specific one on health tech. And then there may be others that are developed in time as well, depending on where there is sufficient demand and ecosystem strengths we can apply to help those businesses. And then, so this is all, if you like, the top part here sits in what we call specific interventions. And then you've obviously got existing, more generic, applicable to a lot of a much wider part of the SME base, so programs like Adventure. So it's really useful for us to help think about where these interventions sit at the different stages and make sure that where there is a handoff that's effective, where there is a gap, we can look at plugging that gap. Thanks, Martin. And again, please. So the first intervention is LEAP, and this sits on IDEA, which is a new or a community platform we've white labeled. And essentially LEAP is aimed at individuals, as Martin said, who've been impacted by the pandemic. It's all about thinking about alternatives to traditional employment. So it's an e-learning course that we have developed collaboratively with upwards of 20 different organizations who provided content, which the delivery group has curated with additional input. And essentially, people register on the IDEA platform, and I think after 2 weeks, we've got about 180 people now. That's a mix of individuals looking to be considered entrepreneurial as well as providers, ecosystem providers. So it's very much about a community. So anybody going through the LEAP course will also get mentoring support along the way. So that's a relationship we developed with Next Up to make sure that this is very much a people first type of intervention. Launched mid-August, what you can see there is the user journey. So again, that's a very important part, so that once people graduate the LEAP program, we have a signposting set up on IDEA that allows us to signpost those businesses to whatever follow-on support is appropriate. Next slide, please, Martin. This is just some example of some of the content partners that we've worked with. And again, please, Martin. And again, please. So build is, as I said, at this next stage beyond where LEAP sits. And this is about, essentially, if you think about this as sitting in the pre-accelerator or accelerator space, as it's typically called, we're not referring to it that, but just to position it in your own minds. So this is a selected cohort of Leeds City Region entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds, very much IDE focused, as I talked about, but sector agnostic. We've just procured a provider to work with us on the co-design of this, which will essentially be an accelerated program of instructional activity, one-to-one coaching and peer-to-peer, the kind of best practice which are important for these things. Probably be a combination of open calls, so again, that broad sector coverage, but also potentially challenge-based. And this is one of the things we're really keen to pilot is, can we identify perhaps corporates or public sector challenge owners, as we call them, that are looking to address their needs, and in doing that, they want to engage with innovative early stage startups. So we're looking to start the co-design, in fact, now, and the pilot will run in the first half of 2021. Thanks, Martin. So very quickly, these are the three elements. So the pipeline, attracting that diverse pipeline, modular program of support, so we can run both open and challenge-based approaches to attract different types of entrepreneurs. And then also very importantly is we're looking to get these ideas ready for investment, but also ready for customers as well. So those are essentially the three elements of the program that we're co-designing. Next slide, Martin. And if you keep, yeah, Annie, that's fine, thank you. So in terms of LCR engagement, we're obviously keen, those two interventions are Leeds City Region interventions. So we're looking to, we've already reached out to a range of organisations and networks to publicise those, and we want to do much more of that, partly through this broader regional stakeholder engagement. But what you can see here, the future state we're heading for with MIT REAP is that we have an LCR backbone organisation which has LCR oversight and an LCR delivery capability, but we also have an LCR strategy as well. So in order to do that, then we need to go through this engaging with regional stakeholders, of which this is a part. So essentially, Andrew and Kirsten have joined Team Leeds now to so that we've got engagement at a high level in discussions and decisions on the backbone and the strategy. But then what we're also looking to do is run an MIT REAP-like program over the next 3 or 4 months so that we can capture the evidence base through mapping and interviews. So those are two key methods we used first time round, and also delivery planning, so that we're working in collaboration with those multi-stakeholders. So this isn't just government or universities, it's the corporates as well, obviously talking with entrepreneurs and investors also. So it's a multi-stakeholder approach. So next stage, please, slide please, Martin. And again, so this interim phase, which runs until the end of the year, we've obviously briefed Kirsten and Andrew. We've also had a briefing session with chief execs from across the district, VCs, and also chief economic officers as well. We had intended to establish a senior multi-stakeholder group similar to Team Leeds to provide oversight and resource. We're just debating at the moment whether that is feasible given the time frame we're working to. Obviously, the principle of that is important. So that's a potential role for the big panel I'll come on to in a second. And then this is the delivery group that they're looking to establish to deliver the activity. And then that activity, as I said, feeds into the iterated strategy for sign-off at a senior level. And then final slide, please, Martin. So I suppose just to leave with an ask and then open it up for questions. As Martin said, we really think the big panel potentially is well placed to endorse the work of this delivery group we're putting together now, and also the iterated strategy. So both of those will be in place, as I said, at the end of the year. Also interested in suggestions for engaging stakeholders in that Leeds City region rollout, in the mapping work, in the interviews, tapping into networks you may have. Specifically on build, on the challenges that you can think we might look to address, that we have assets in, we have particular strengths, businesses are looking to engage with startups early stage. Offering time and expertise to entrepreneurs potentially as well is something that some of you might be interested in. Or are there other ways in which the big panel itself or individual members can help? So I'll leave it there.
Good. Thank you very much, Martin and David. So the questions for the panel are pretty clear there, I think. 1, 2, and 3. On the chat, David Sidler was making an interesting remark. Would you like to say something about that now, perhaps, David?
Yeah, just about the point of trying to engage a broader spectrum of sort of potential entrepreneurs and ideas. I mean, I've been involved in taking some ideas and sort of bringing them to market in the past, and especially in the environmental testing field in a job that I used to do previously. And, some of the less conventional things like hackathons and, sort of skunk works events, which are, a bit more sort of edgy, should we say, than and not so corporate. I've seen those as being very useful to and less threatening maybe for people who've potentially got good ideas, but from a, as I say, maybe a more diverse background. So that's just something which I think we should bear in mind when we're trying to get the widest possible engagement with this.
Yeah, it's a very good point, David. In fact, there is an opportunity to feed in some of those ideas, crowdsourcing of ideas and the specific things you talked about in the co-design process. So happy to chat with you on that.
And the other thing is the potential for different ways of monetizing ideas. Not the conventional, we've got to sell something. So that's something else that we should always consider. You look at some of the, you look at somebody like a Facebook, for instance, and on the surface, when they've set out, how do you monetize that idea? So not constrain ourselves with, we've got to sell something to somebody sort of thing. Yeah. There may be other ways of monetizing innovation going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's great points. Would be great to catch up with you actually and get some of your other ideas as well.
Yeah, by all means, I'm quite happy to have an offline meeting about that.
Well, thank you, David.
Martin, could you unshare your screen? I can't actually see enough people at the moment.
Sorry, I'll do that now.
Yes, Brian wants to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ideas is a crucial element, for any entrepreneur. Having a good idea that's tested and validated in the marketplace is obviously, a crucial element in the success. But also the motivation of the entrepreneur is key. Their ability and skills, and whether or not they've got access to the suitable resources. So it's a kind of whole package of support, and you need those 4 or 5 ingredients to have the best chance of being successful. And I guess my question was, obviously you're looking to attract into the pipeline a quite diverse group of entrepreneurs. My question was really about how will you identify the entrepreneurs with the ideas, and what's the criteria for selection?
Well, that's something we need to, so we've outlined some of the broad principles that I've talked about. That's why we need to go through the co-design process. So we've looked at a lot of best practice of how these accelerators run, including the challenge-based ones, which tend to be more inclusive. And we're just about to start that co-design process with the provider who has a lot of experience of designing as well as delivering these interventions. So we've outlined the content and we've considered some of the criteria, but we really need to go through that in process over the next 6 to 8 weeks is the time we've allocated for that.
And I think, Brian, you also make a really great point that you know, we're trying to ensure that we're so connected with the rest of the innovation ecosystem here, because I think, again, the key thing here, one of the things we found early on was entrepreneurs were struggling to navigate around the innovation ecosystem within the region. So for us, and David, I think, mentioned it several times, we want to be incredibly collaborative here and make sure that everything is as permeable as possible to ensure that actually we can point entrepreneurs in the right direction. And it may be a totally different organization, or maybe somebody else in a different part of the country that actually has that expertise to support them. So.
Okay, thanks, Martin.
Good. There's a few comments coming in on the chat. I think you can take it as read, really, Martin, that everybody on the call would be very happy to give time and expertise where it seems appropriate. It may be quite hard for us to know exactly how to do that, so we probably need some help from you as it emerges, as it were. Mark Roberts, would you like to say something on this as well? Go on. Sorry. Yes, Martin.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's part of David's plan in terms of what is the input we need as we start to engage more broadly. So I think once we put that together, perhaps we can talk to you, Andrew, and you can point us in the right direction in terms of the people within the panel that have expertise and would like to get involved.
Over to Mark.
Thanks, Andrew. And I put in the chat, I think really support this great initiative. I mean, my own sort of personal journey as an entrepreneur over the last 8 years, thinking now what I know, which I wish I'd have known in sort of year one or even month one, is incredible. And I remember sort of scrabbling around, not being aware at all that any support existed. So if I can sort of help in any way, share experiences or signal the bits that I'd have found helpful. I think now my business is part of a global innovation ecosystem in the beer world, and there's lots of insights that we could potentially bring from that as well to potentially help this region. So just a big signal that I'd love to get involved if you would like to have a chat.
That's great. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Good. We're slightly out of time, and I feel I've slightly mischaired this, so I apologise, particularly to Liz Gardner, who's the last item. A number of people are going to have to leave at 5 or 4 o'clock, rather, I'm sure. So if you do need to do that, please just do, and don't feel the need to communicate about it, just go. I think with that, though, and in order to be fair to Liz, we probably need to move on to that item now. But both for the item that we've just had on MIT and also this next one, I'd welcome any emails, and I know Sarah would as well, welcome any emails where if people feel that they haven't been able to make their contribution, they can make it through email, and we can make sure that that gets networked as it needs to Martin and David, or indeed in the next item to Liz. Is that okay, Martin?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so for those of you who are able to stay, can I pass on to, I think, Sarah, who will introduce Liz Gardner.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah. So this item is just to give an update to the panel on the health tech MOU that was signed between partners across the city region last year. And Liz will be giving a brief update on what that is and what it's going to do. And then we hope we can have maybe do it via email, but a brief chat on what's going to happen next, what needs to happen next to drive this agenda forward.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. I've got a few slides that I'll just like to share. I'll try and skip as quickly as I can. Just bear with me, I'll share my screen and I'll share them afterwards for anyone who's missed out. So, can you see my slides there?
Yes.
Yeah,
thank you.
Lovely.
Yes.
Right. So, there we go. Right. So this work really has its grounding in the SIA, of which the LEP was one of the founding, the drivers really back in 2017. So the Strength and Innovation Audit, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, really showed what enormous potential there was in our region, and many reports since then have backed that up. So the SIA recommended a number of things, including further investment into medtech in the region, which we more recently refer to as health tech, so that we include digital and combined technologies as well. And it also recommended the creation of a leadership group. So really that's what we've been doing since then. In 2019, as it mentions in the report that you've been sent, leaders from across the system signed a memorandum of understanding, and that included the LEP, 5 universities in the Leeds City region, as well as the Association of British Health Tech Industries. And then a representative from each of those got together and they formed the leadership group, and that's been supported by the Leeds Academic Health Partnership. So in November and February, 2 workshops were held, and we also carried out around 60 interviews. Some of you on the call today were involved in those. So that was with leadership group members and regional stakeholders, and we've identified 5 must-win battles. And I guess the most pressing of these is around leadership and vision and purpose. And to take these forward, we now need to create a kind of backbone organisation to lead that work and coordinate that into delivery. And so the leadership group have already aligned around these statements for their purpose, their vision and mission. And the real message here is that we're talking about the dual benefits of both health and wealth. So we're focusing on inclusive growth and the health and care benefits for our local populations. So more recently, with COVID and also the uncertainties around Brexit, we've seen real renewed focus on health tech. We've seen the critical role of research and rapid innovation, about manufacturing and the supply chain and the importance of those, for example, with ventilators for the care system. And so we've seen increased commitment to health tech in the region, which is really great. We've also seen increasing government support promised from BEIS and UKRI. And these are just some of the things that have been cropping up over the summer and that have kept us very busy. So the devolution deal obviously has created the West Yorkshire Innovation Network with its dual hubs at Nexus and 3M BIC in Huddersfield. The Economic Recovery Board and Plan that you're all familiar with. There's also the ICS and the Yorkshire universities have set up a research and innovation work stream. And I think we've got Peter O'Brien on the call today. Key reports such as Nesta's missing $4 billion, which is arguing for the levelling up of research development investment into the north. So following that, also reports from the Northern Health Science Alliance, and also a report from the AHSN, the NHS Confederation, and again, Yorkshire universities. So it's really very timely, this levelling up agenda. And we're also aligning with local development. So for example, with Leeds alone, where I'm based, we have the Leeds Innovation District. We're talking to LTHT regarding their new hospital at the LGI. There's a Centre for Responsive Health Tech that is a joint initiative set up by LTHT and the University of Leeds. And of course, MITREAP, so we're working closely with them and their MITREAP Light strategy that David's referred to. So that's all really encouraging. We just need to make sure that we avoid duplication and that we appear joined up to everybody else out there nationally and globally. So we've spent the summer finding out as much as we can about those initiatives and aligning as best we can. I won't spend too long on this, but it's just to say the leadership group has also worked on the expected benefits and priority areas. These have been grouped into economic benefits, health and care benefits, and university benefits. And a lot of these are around building those relationships to match companies with innovations to the health and care partners where there's a need for them, but also working both ways. So helping the NHS to specify what its main areas of need are and matching innovators to them. We've also worked on some measures for each of these benefits. And thank you very much to people like James Hopton at the LEP, who's on the call, who's been really helpful in getting us going on that. So my last slide, just the next steps are to identify some flagship programs for us to focus on. We're currently collecting proposals and the leadership group will be reviewing these on the 23rd of September. So far, we've got programs from Leeds, Huddersfield and Bradford, but that's not to say we don't want more. So if you've got any ideas or anything you'd like us to support, please do get in touch. And so we'll be defining the project inputs of those and agreeing how, as regional partners, we can really get behind those, drive them forward. And we'll be carrying out some analysis and modelling, so more specific economic modelling, return on investment calculations. We'll be looking at the health and care benefits, looking at technology assessments. So we have a lot of expertise in that in the region. So at York, Sheffield, also both main universities in Leeds, and collectively building an investment case for short and long-term funding. So that's my email address. If I stop sharing, I'll hand over to Sarah, if that's all right.
Thanks, Liz. Yes, that was just a bit of an update paper in terms of where the MOU leadership group had got to. In the paper that's been circulated, we've talked about the need to put more investment and resources into this agenda to drive it forward. So I'd welcome any views from the panel in terms of, well, how we do that, and anybody who really wants to get involved in this and help with this, driving this forward.
Good. Thank you both. Thank you, Liz. It's obviously a very welcome initiative, and we've for long identified health tech as one of the areas that is a key sector for the region. So it's really nice to see a coalition of interested people getting together and actually reaching more widely than the usual suspects, as it were, and getting some momentum behind it. Does anybody on the call want to give any feedback to Liz? Richard, maybe, would you like to say something?
Andrew, it's Peter. Could I just say something very briefly?
Yeah, sure. Carry on.
Yeah, thanks very much. No, thanks, Liz. Yeah, so I guess incredibly supportive of this agenda. The city region has got real strengths here. From our perspective as Yorkshire Universities, what we've been trying to do recently is to articulate, even pre-pandemic, the value and the role of health as an economic driver. And clearly medtech is part of that agenda. Bringing together our universities with the ICS is looking not only at research and innovation in its broadest sense, so medtech forms part of that, but there's also a whole series of strong academic research assets in the region that we've looking to see how we could collaborate more around that. But similarly, some work around workforce planning in the health and care sector, which is going to be incredibly important in the context of moving out of the pandemic, but thinking about the resources and investment that needs to go in the health and care sector in the region, and how the integrated care system can resource that and, if you like, attract more of that investment from national funders and national agencies. So we're trying to sort of nest all of this within the context of the devolution deal, the local industrial strategy, the economic recovery plan. And so I think this work at on the medtech agenda is absolutely brilliant in the sense of it's articulating the real distinctiveness of the city region to national government and investors, both nationally and internationally. So, we had Liz, she spoke at our research and innovation workstream meeting in July, and, made a very powerful case for what that work is doing. And so I would hope that we could find some support to resource that work going forward, hopefully through the recovery plan. But I think, the region needs to back this.
Okay, that's nice and clear. Thank you very much, Peter. And a nice endorsement for you there, Liz.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to comment on this occasion? I mean, I think certainly I know Richard is struggling to contribute verbally at the moment, but you can see in the chat room he's very supportive and is from the industry. So that's another good indication. Lee is also offering to help, which is, I'm sure, welcome. Yep, you're getting a thumbs up for that. So I think you should just feel that we are very warm about this, Liz, and that we would like to support it going forward. And we welcome the fact that you've explained what it involves and where you've got to at the moment. And I think we would like to help in any way that we can going forward.
Right. Thank you very much.
So with that, sorry to have overrun by 10 minutes, and many thanks to the 20 of you who have managed to stay on. I'm most grateful to that. And well done for a good meeting, everybody. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thanks, Andrew.